Commander Jake Reaper. Harrison had seen worse situations, but being strapped to an alien interrogation chair, while 3-meter-tall insectoid creatures clicked their mandibles at him, wasn't exactly how he'd planned to spend his Tuesday. The Zephyrian vessel hummed with an unsettling frequency that seemed to vibrate through his bones, and the acrid smell of their atmosphere recyclers made his eyes water despite the breathing mask they'd grudgingly provided. The lead interrogator, a particularly imposing specimen with chitinous armor that gleamed purple under the harsh lighting, leaned closer. Its compound eyes reflected the room's sterile glow as it spoke through a translation device that rendered its voice in mechanical, emotionless tones. Human designation, Jake Harrison. Service number 447792315. We know much about your species already. Your military structure, your weapons, your pathetic attempts at space travel. The creature's antennae twitched with what Jake had learned to recognize as amusement. But you, Commander Harrison, you interest us more than most. Jake kept his expression neutral, falling back on his seer training. Name, rank, service number, nothing more. The aliens had captured him during a reconnaissance mission on Kepler 442b, where human colonists had been reporting strange disappearances. What should have been a simple investigation had turned into a nightmare when Zephyrian ships had emerged from behind the planet's larger moon. His team had fought valiantly, but they'd been outnumbered 50-1. The last thing Jake remembered before waking up on this ship was ordering his men to fall back while he provided covering fire. Whether they'd escaped or been captured too, he couldn't know. That uncertainty gnawed at him more than the restraints cutting into his wrists. Your silence is noted, Commander, but ultimately futile. The interrogator gestured to a smaller alien operating what appeared to be a holographic display. We have methods of extracting information that your kind has never encountered. However, we prefer cooperation. It reduces the mess. The display flickered to life, showing tactical readouts of human military installations across known space. Jake's blood ran cold as he recognized classified locations, ship positions, and defensive capabilities. Either the Zephyrians had been planning this invasion for years, or they had a source inside human command. As you can see, we are quite well informed about your species' military capabilities. What we lack is understanding of your psychological weaknesses. You humans have this curious tendency to fight beyond all logic, even when defeat is certain. We wish to understand this flaw so we might exploit it more efficiently. Jake finally spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. You call it a flaw. We call it being human. The interrogator's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Jake was beginning to interpret as laughter. Fascinating. Even now, facing interrogation aboard an enemy vessel with your entire species under threat, you maintain this irrational defiance. Tell us, Commander Harrison, what drives this behavior? Is it loyalty to your government? Religious conviction? Simple stupidity? None of the above, Jake replied, testing the strength of his restraints without making it obvious. The metal was some kind of alien alloy, far stronger than anything human technology could produce. But the locking mechanism looked mechanical rather than electronic. Given enough time and the right pressure, we fight because that's what humans do. We've been doing it for thousands of years against odds much worse than you bugs could ever imagine. This time, the mandible clicking carried a different tone, irritation, perhaps even anger. The interrogator moved closer, its breath carrying the scent of sulfur and decay. Your arrogance will be your downfall, human. We have conquered 17 different species across this galaxy. Each believed themselves special, unique, destined for greatness. Each learned otherwise. And yet here you are, trying to understand why we won't just roll over and die. Jake met the creature's compound gaze without flinching. Maybe those other species weren't as special as you thought. Maybe you just got lucky. The smaller alien at the console chittered something in their native language. The interrogator's head swiveled toward it, antennae twitching. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone suggested urgency. Whatever they were discussing, it had the lead interrogator's full attention. When it turned back to Jake, something had changed. There was a tension in its posture that hadn't been there before, a subtle shift that suggested the dynamic of the interrogation had somehow altered. "It seems your people are more resourceful than we anticipated, Commander. Even now, they mount rescue operations despite the hopelessness of their situation. 3 human vessels were detected approaching this sector less than 1 solar cycle ago. They have been destroyed, of course, but their persistence is noteworthy." Jake felt a spike of grief for the crews who had died trying to reach him, but he forced it down. Instead, he focused on what the alien's words really meant. His people knew where he was. They were coming for him, despite the odds. That changed everything. "You seem surprised that we'd come for one man," Jake observed. "I guess that's another difference between your species and mine. We don't leave people behind." Sentiment. Another weakness to exploit. But the interrogator's voice carried less certainty than before. "No matter. Their sacrifice is meaningless. You will provide us with the information we seek, or we will extract it through less pleasant means." The creature gestured to what Jake had initially taken for a medical device mounted on an articulated arm. As it rotated toward him, he could see it wasn't designed for healing. Sharp neural probes extended from its tip, surrounded by a pulsing energy field that made his teeth ache just looking at it. "This device interfaces directly with your nervous system," the interrogator explained with obvious relish. "It can access memories, emotions, even subconscious responses. The process is uncomfortable for organic beings. Most subjects lose their sanity before we extract the information we require." Jake stared at the approaching device without flinching. "Most subjects probably weren't Navy SEALs. Your military training is irrelevant here, Commander. This is not a matter of pain tolerance or mental fortitude. The neural interface bypasses your conscious mind entirely. You may think yourself prepared, but no biological entity can resist its effects indefinitely." The probe stopped just centimeters from Jake's forehead, energy crackling along its length. He could feel the hair on his arms standing up from the electrical charge. Whatever this thing did, it was going to hurt in ways he couldn't imagine. But as the interrogator prepared to activate the device, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The lights flickered, and Jake felt the deck vibrate beneath his feet. Emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow as automated announcements echoed in the alien's clicking language. The interrogator spun toward the console operator, mandibles working furiously. The smaller alien's responses came in rapid bursts, too fast for the translation device to keep up. But Jake didn't need to understand the words to recognize panic when he heard it. Something was happening, something the Zephyrians hadn't expected. Through the chaos, Jake allowed himself a grim smile. His people weren't just coming for him. They were here. The revelation. The ship lurched violently to port, throwing the smaller alien against its console. Sparks erupted from damaged systems as the neural probe swung wildly on its arm, missing Jake's head by inches. Emergency klaxons wailed in frequencies that made his bones ache, and the interrogator's calm demeanor evaporated like morning mist. "Impossible," the creature hissed, its translation device struggling to keep up with its rapid speech. "Our sensors detected no human vessels within 3 light years of this position. Their primitive technology cannot mask signatures from our detection arrays." Jake tested his restraints again, feeling the slightest give in the left wrist cuff. The ship's violent maneuvering had stressed the mounting points. "Maybe your sensors aren't as good as you think they are." Another impact shook the vessel, this one accompanied by the distinctive whine of human plasma cannons. Jake had heard that sound countless times in combat simulations, but never had it been more welcome than now. The interrogation chamber's lights flickered again, and he noticed several ceiling panels had come loose from their mountings. The console operator chittered frantically at its superior, gesturing at displays that showed what Jake assumed were tactical readouts. The interrogator's response was a low, threatening growl that needed no translation. Whatever was happening outside, it wasn't going according to their plan. "Your vessels are obsolete," the interrogator said, turning back to Jake with renewed fury. "Chemical propulsion, primitive weapon systems, laughable armor. How do they dare attack a Zephyrian battlecruiser?" "Because we're humans," Jake replied simply. "We're too stupid to know when we're beaten." The ship shuddered under another volley, and this time Jake heard something that made his heart race with hope. The distinctive howl of atmospheric breach sirens. Whatever was hitting them was getting through their defenses. The interrogator activated a wall-mounted communication device, barking orders in its native language. The responses came back in equally frantic tones, and Jake watched as the creature's confident posture gradually shifted to something approaching fear. "Your people are more persistent than anticipated," the alien admitted, its translator giving the words an oddly formal quality despite the obvious stress in its voice. "But persistence without power is merely suicide. We have weapons that can crack planets, shields that have withstood the assault of entire fleets. What do you possibly hope to accomplish?" Jake worked at his restraints, feeling the left cuff loosen another few millimeters. The mounting bolt was definitely compromised. "We hope to get our guy back. Everything else is just details." The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated, causing Jake's stomach to lurch as he briefly lifted from the chair before settling back down. Emergency lighting cast shifting shadows across the interrogation chamber, and he could smell the acrid smoke of burning electronics filtering through the ventilation system. "You would sacrifice dozens of lives for one individual?" The interrogator seemed genuinely puzzled by this concept. "In Zephyrian society, the needs of the collective supersede individual considerations. One unit is expendable if its loss prevents greater casualties." "That's the difference between us," Jake said, pulling steadily against the damaged restraint. "You see expendable units, we see family." The console operator suddenly stood upright, its entire body rigid with what Jake recognized as shock. It spoke rapidly to the interrogator, gesturing frantically at its displays. The lead alien moved to examine the readings, and Jake heard something he'd never expected from a Zephyrian, a sound of genuine fear. "This cannot be accurate," the interrogator said, more to itself than to Jake. "Sensor data indicates the attacking vessels are not using standard human propulsion signatures. Energy readings are beyond anything in our intelligence files on your species." Jake felt the left restraint give way completely, his hand sliding free. He kept his arm positioned as if still bound, not wanting to alert his captors to the change. "Maybe your intelligence files need updating." The ship rocked again, but this time the impact felt different, more precise, more controlled. Jake had been in enough naval engagements to recognize the signature of surgical strikes versus area bombardment. Whatever was attacking the Zephyrian vessel was doing so with frightening accuracy. "Tactical analysis indicates concentrated fire on propulsion and weapons systems," the interrogator read from the console, its voice carrying disbelief. "They are attempting to disable rather than destroy. This suggests they intend to board and recover you personally." "Told you we don't leave people behind." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, and it activated another communication channel. The responses it received were clearly not what it wanted to hear. Jake caught fragments through the translator. Enough to understand that the Zephyrian ship was taking heavy damage and their defensive systems were failing faster than anyone had thought possible. "Impossible," the interrogator repeated, studying the tactical displays. "Human vessels possess neither the firepower nor the technological sophistication to challenge a Zephyrian battlecruiser, yet somehow they are systematically dismantling our defenses." Jake said nothing, but privately he was wondering the same thing. The last intelligence reports he'd seen before his capture had indicated human military technology was still decades behind Zephyrian capabilities. The fact that human ships were not only surviving this engagement, but actually winning it, suggested something had changed dramatically. The console operator let out a sound that the translator rendered as a scream. Whatever it was seeing on its displays had driven it to genuine panic. The interrogator rushed over, and Jake could see both aliens staring at readouts with what appeared to be complete incomprehension. "Energy signatures are off all known scales," the interrogator said, speaking more to itself than to its subordinate. "These readings suggest technology beyond anything in our xenological databases. How is this possible?" A new sound penetrated the interrogation chamber, the distinctive whine of cutting tools working through reinforced hull plating. Jake had heard it before during boarding exercises, but never had it sounded so beautiful. His people weren't just disabling the ship, they were coming aboard. The interrogator spun back toward Jake, its compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting like faceted rubies. "What have your people done? What technology are they employing?" "Maybe you should ask them," Jake suggested, working his right hand loose from its restraint while the aliens were distracted. "I hear they'll be here any minute." The cutting sound grew louder, accompanied by the harsh sizzle of superheated metal. Whatever they were using to breach the hull was making quick work of Zephyrian armor plating. Jake estimated they had maybe 5 minutes before human forces reached his location. The interrogator activated every communication channel on its console, barking orders and demands for information. The responses came back in increasingly frantic tones, and Jake noticed that many of the status lights on the aliens' displays were now flashing red. "Impossible," the creature said for the 4th time. But now its voice carried something beyond disbelief. It carried the dawning realization that everything it thought it knew about human capabilities had been wrong. Jake freed his right hand and began working on his ankle restraints, keeping his movements small and controlled. The aliens were too focused on their failing defenses to notice his progress. "You know what I think?" Jake said conversationally as he worked. "I think you picked the wrong species to mess with. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know things about warfare that you bugs never learned from conquering primitive civilizations." The ship lurched again, but this time it felt like docking clamps engaging rather than weapon impacts. The cutting sound stopped abruptly, replaced by the heavy metallic footsteps of boarding parties moving through the vessel. The interrogator looked at its console operator, then back at Jake. For the first time since his capture, he could see uncertainty in the alien's posture. The unshakable confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. "Your people are aboard this vessel," the interrogator said, stating the obvious. "But how? Our intelligence indicated human boarding tactics were primitive, relying on overwhelming numbers rather than technological superiority. Yet somehow they have penetrated our defenses with minimal force." Jake smiled grimly. "Maybe it's not about the technology. Maybe it's about the humans using it." In the distance, growing closer by the second, came the sound of human voices coordinating their advance. Professional, controlled, lethal. The sound of operators who knew exactly what they were doing. The interrogator reached for what appeared to be a weapon but hesitated. Whatever was happening was beyond its understanding, and that hesitation would be its downfall. Because the one thing Jake knew about his people, the thing these aliens had failed to comprehend, was that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to protect their own, and someone had just made the mistake of taking one of their own. The interrogation chamber door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Through the smoke came figures in advanced combat armor that Jake had never seen before, moving with the fluid precision of apex predators. The lead operator's helmet retracted, revealing a face Jake recognized despite the decade that had passed since they'd served together. "Hello, Jake," Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Ghost Chen said calmly. Her rifle trained on the interrogator while her team secured the room. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was hell." The Zephyrian interrogator raised what Jake now recognized as a plasma weapon, but froze as 6 human rifles focused on it with mechanical precision. The console operator had already dropped to the floor, making itself as small as possible. "I wouldn't," Sarah advised the alien. "My boys are a little cranky about someone taking our friend. They might overreact." Jake finished freeing his ankles and stood slowly, his muscles protesting after hours of restraint. "Sarah Chen, they let you off the leash for this?" "Special circumstances," she replied, not taking her eyes off the Zephyrians. "Plus, when someone grabs the Reaper, word gets around pretty fast. Turns out you've got more friends than you thought." The interrogator's mandibles clicked rapidly, and its translator struggled to keep up. "Impossible. Human military records indicate no technology capable of penetrating our defenses. Your vessels should have been destroyed before reaching weapons range." Sarah smiled, and Jake remembered why that expression had always made enemy combatants nervous. "You're working from old intelligence, Bug. Things have changed since you started your little invasion." One of her team members approached Jake with a medical scanner, checking him for injuries while keeping his weapon ready. The soldier's armor bore markings Jake didn't recognize, and the technology integrated into the suit was decades ahead of anything he'd seen in human military development. "Ma'am, Reaper's showing signs of neural interface exposure but no permanent damage," the soldier reported. His voice carried the flat professionalism of Special Forces operators, but underneath Jake detected something else. Rage, carefully controlled but unmistakably present. "Good," Sarah said. "Jake, we need to move. This bucket's about to become very unfriendly real estate." "Wait," the interrogator said, its translator rendering desperation in mechanical tones. "Your technology, where did you acquire these capabilities? Our intelligence networks are comprehensive. No human research facility possesses the knowledge to develop such systems." Sarah exchanged a look with Jake before answering. "You want to know the funny thing about humans? We're really good at learning from our mistakes and picking things up along the way." The alien's compound eyes fixed on her with sudden understanding. "Impossible. You have encountered other Zephyrian forces. You have salvaged our technology." "Among other things," Sarah confirmed. "Turns out when you start a war with humanity, we get motivated. Amazing what we can accomplish when we put our minds to it." Jake noticed the weapons his rescuers carried were indeed hybrid designs, combining human engineering with what appeared to be Zephyrian energy systems. The armor showed similar integration, sleeker and more advanced than anything in the standard military inventory. "How long?" Jake asked as they prepared to leave. 6 months since first contact turned into open hostilities," Sarah replied. 3 months since we started hitting back. 2 weeks since we figured out where they were keeping you." The ship shuddered as explosions echoed through the hull. The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, forming a protective formation around Jake as they headed for the damaged doorway. "You should know," the interrogator called after them. "This vessel is merely one of thousands. Your small victory here changes nothing. The Zephyrian Empire spans 100 systems. Humanity cannot possibly hope to resist our full military might." Sarah paused at the threshold and looked back. "You know what your mistake was? You thought taking prisoners was about gathering intelligence." The alien's antennae twitched in confusion. "What other purpose could it serve?" "You took our people," Sarah said simply. "That made it personal." They moved through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, passing the bodies of Zephyrian crew members who had tried to repel the boarding action. Jake noticed his rescuers moved with unusual coordination, their armor systems apparently linked in ways that allowed near telepathic communication. "How many did you lose?" Jake asked as they navigated around a collapsed bulkhead. "Taking this ship?" "None," Sarah replied. "Taking you back?" "That's a different conversation." They reached the breach point where human forces had entered the vessel. Through the opening, Jake could see the docking tube connecting to what appeared to be a human ship, but one unlike any design he recognized. The hull showed the same hybrid technology as the soldiers' equipment, sleek curves integrated with angular human engineering. "Sarah," Jake said as they prepared to transfer. "What aren't you telling me?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. "The war's not going well, Jake. We're holding our own now, but barely. The bugs were right about one thing. They've got numbers we can't match conventionally." "So how are we winning?" "We're not winning," she corrected as they entered the docking tube. "We're surviving. And every day we survive, we get a little bit smarter, a little bit angrier, and a little bit more dangerous." The airlock cycled, and Jake found himself aboard a vessel that defied everything he thought he knew about human technology. The corridors hummed with energy conduits that pulsed with alien light, and the air carried the ozone scent of advanced power systems. "Welcome aboard the HMS Retribution," Sarah said as they walked toward what Jake assumed was the bridge. "Our first fully integrated captured tech warship. She's not pretty, but she gets the job done." "How many ships like this do we have?" 17 operational, with more coming online every week. Turns out when you're fighting for the survival of your species, you learn to adapt pretty quickly." They passed through blast doors that sealed behind them with a hiss of pneumatics. The corridor beyond was filled with human crew members working at stations that combined familiar interfaces with alien technology. Jake could see the strain on their faces, the weight of fighting a war they'd never asked for. "Jake," Sarah said as they approached the bridge, "there's something else. Something about why they grabbed you specifically." "Let me guess. It wasn't random." "The Zephyrians have been studying human military history. They identified what they call chaos factors, individuals whose presence in a conflict tends to dramatically alter outcomes. Your service record, particularly in asymmetric warfare situations. They think I'm some kind of super soldier?" "They think you're a symbol," Sarah corrected. "The kind of human who inspires others to fight beyond rational limits. They wanted to break you publicly, demonstrate that even our best couldn't stand against them." Jake absorbed this information as they reached the bridge. Through the main view screen, he could see the Zephyrian battlecruiser they'd just left, dead in space with its engines dark and weapons offline. In the distance, 3 more human ships waited in formation, their hulls reflecting the same hybrid design philosophy. Instead, Jake observed, they just proved that humans will go to any lengths to get their people back. "That's the plan," Sarah agreed. "Every Zephyrian ship we take, every piece of technology we integrate, every rescue mission we complete, it all sends the same message." Jake understood. It wasn't about the tactical value of one SEAL or even the intelligence he might possess. It was about the statement. Humans protected their own, regardless of cost, regardless of odds. "So what now?" Jake asked. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Now we show them exactly what happens when you wake up a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war." Behind them, the Zephyrian battlecruiser suddenly erupted in a chain of internal explosions, its hull breaking apart in a brilliant display of destruction. The rescue team had left presents behind. "Besides," Sarah added, watching the fireworks, "we're just getting started." 6 months later, Jake stood in the command center of Armstrong Base, humanity's first military installation constructed entirely from repurposed Zephyrian technology. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the orbital shipyards where captured alien vessels were being stripped down and rebuilt into something the galaxy had never seen before. "Status report," Jake said to the assembled officers, his new rank insignia catching the light from the holographic displays surrounding the command table. 73 Zephyrian vessels captured or destroyed in the last month alone, reported Commander Torres, the tactical intelligence officer. Their advance has stalled on all fronts. More importantly, we've identified the locations of their primary staging areas. Jake studied the three-dimensional star map floating above the table, red markers indicating confirmed Zephyrian positions, while blue showed human-controlled space. The front lines had stabilized into something resembling actual battle lines rather than the desperate rearguard actions that had characterized the early months of the war. "What about the other species they've conquered?" Sarah asked from her position at Jake's left. The months of fighting had worn lines into her face, but her eyes still held the same deadly focus that had made her legendary among special operations forces. "That's where it gets interesting," Torres replied, manipulating the display to show a broader view of the galaxy. "Our psychological warfare broadcasts are having an effect. We're receiving communications from resistance movements on at least 12 worlds under Zephyrian occupation." Jake nodded grimly. The broadcasts had been his idea. A simple message transmitted on all frequencies. Humanity does not abandon its own. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity remembers. Apparently, other species remembered too. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Kim from the communications station, "incoming priority transmission from the Zephyrian High Command. They're requesting a dialogue." The assembled officers exchanged glances. In 18 months of warfare, the Zephyrians had never attempted diplomatic contact. They'd simply attacked, conquered, and moved on to the next target. The fact that they were talking now suggested something fundamental had changed. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a Zephyrian unlike any Jake had encountered before. This one was larger, its chitinous armor bearing intricate markings that suggested high rank. When it spoke, the translation was cleaner, more sophisticated than the crude systems used by field interrogators. "I am Supreme Commander HFY of the Zephyrian Expeditionary Force. I address the human military leadership." "You've got our attention," Jake replied. "This is Admiral Harrison of the Terran Defense Force." "Admiral Harrison, the designation Reaper is also associated with your identity, is it not?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Somehow, the implications of that nickname had spread far beyond the original interrogation. "It is." "I see. Admiral Harrison, the Zephyrian Empire wishes to discuss terms for the cessation of hostilities between our species." The silence in the command center was profound. After 18 months of desperate warfare, the aliens were talking about ending the conflict. Sarah leaned forward, her expression skeptical. "What kind of terms?" Jake asked carefully. "The Zephyrian Empire will withdraw from all human-controlled systems and establish a neutral buffer zone between our territories. In exchange, humanity will cease its interference with Zephyrian operations in other sectors and return all captured Zephyrian technology and personnel." Jake almost laughed. Almost. "You want us to give back the ships and equipment we've taken, stop helping other species resist your empire, and trust you to honor a treaty, after you started this war by attacking our colonies without warning? The alternative is continued warfare, which serves neither species' interests." "Actually," Sarah interjected, "continued warfare serves our interests just fine. Every month we get stronger. Every month you get weaker. Why would we accept a deal that stops our momentum?" Supreme Commander HFY's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned to recognize as agitation. "Your species has proven more resilient than anticipated. However, the Zephyrian Empire possesses resources far beyond what you have encountered thus far. Core fleet vessels make your current opponents appear primitive by comparison." "Let me ask you something," Jake said, studying the alien commander's image. "In your conquest of those 17 other species, how many of them came back for their captured people?" "None. Rescue operations are tactically unsound when losses exceed. How many of them turned your own technology against you?" A longer pause. "Such tactics were uncommon." How many of them kept fighting when any rational analysis said they should surrender? The Zephyrian commander's image flickered, suggesting transmission difficulties. When it stabilized, Jake thought he detected something new in its posture, something that looked remarkably like uncertainty. Admiral Harrison, your species' behavior patterns do not conform to established xenological models. Standard conquest protocols have proven inadequate. Jake exchanged a look with Sarah. They'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was satisfying in ways he couldn't express. Here's the thing about humans, Jake said, leaning forward. We don't fight wars the way you expect us to. We don't surrender when the math says we should. We don't abandon our people when it's inconvenient. And we sure as hell don't forget when someone attacks our homes. Your point? My point is that you started a war with the wrong species. You wanted to conquer humanity like you conquered those other civilizations, but we're not them. We're humans. We fight dirty, we adapt fast, and we never, ever give up. The alien commander's image seemed to shrink slightly. What are your terms? Jake smiled, and it was the same expression that had made Zephyrian interrogators nervous months before. Complete withdrawal from all occupied systems. Return of all captured non-human populations to their homeworlds. Reparations for damages caused during your invasion. Oh, and one more thing. Which is? You're going to help us hunt down any Zephyrian commanders who violated the laws of war, starting with the ones who authorized the torture and execution of prisoners. The transmission feed crackled with what sounded like multiple alien voices arguing in the background. When Supreme Commander Thexhai returned his attention to the camera, his posture had changed again. This time it definitely looked like fear. These terms are unacceptable. The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender. We do not pay reparations. We do not submit to inferior species. Then we'll keep doing what we've been doing, Jake replied calmly. Taking your ships, freeing your prisoners, and teaching every species in this galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire isn't as invincible as you want them to believe. You cannot possibly believe you can defeat the entire empire with your primitive technology and limited numbers. Jake gestured to the displays around the command center, showing the growing human fleet, the liberated worlds, the spreading resistance movements. We don't need to defeat your entire empire. We just need to prove that it can be beaten. Once we do that, every species you've conquered is going to want to have a conversation with us about freedom. And if we refuse your terms, then we'll see you on the battlefield, Jake said simply. But I'll give you some free advice. Next time you want to interrogate a human prisoner, you might want to ask yourself whether it's worth waking up an entire species that spent millennia learning how to kill things that are bigger and meaner than they are. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in silence. After a moment, Lieutenant Kim looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving communications from 17 different systems. Resistance movements reporting increased activity. It seems our conversation was broadcast across Zephyrian communication networks. Jake nodded. That had been the plan. Let every conquered species hear that someone had told the Zephyrian Empire to go to hell and lived to talk about it. Status of the fleet? All ships ready for immediate deployment, Sarah reported. The new hybrid vessels are performing beyond expectations. Good, because something tells me the Zephyrians are about to learn exactly what happens when you capture a human nicknamed Reaper. Jake looked out at the stars, where human ships waited for orders to continue their mission of liberation. The Zephyrians had made a simple mistake. They'd thought capturing one man would break human morale. Instead, they'd awakened something that had been sleeping in humanity's collective consciousness for generations. The understanding that sometimes, to protect what you love, you have to become the thing that monsters fear in the dark. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been very good at being monsters when they needed to be. and the Zephyrian Empire was about to discover that the universe contained something far more terrifying than their invasion fleets. An angry human with nothing left to lose.